Nothing brings a scene to life more than details, and this kit has plenty of them. In this video we will be showing how to paint, weather, and age both rosin and white metal parts to complete the scene around your dueling shacks. So we have our details here. They're rosin and white metal detail parts. We have some white metal ones we saw when we opened the box earlier episode, and the rosin ones. Now these are the wooden ones, wooden items of the rosin castings, which I have separated from the rosin items that will be that are metal, barrels, trash can, oil cans, because we will paint them differently. But you can see these items are very small, and it would be hard to hold the size and paint. So what we're going to do is make some strips to hold the little items. And what I did, the instructions recommend taking some old coffee stir sticks. In my case, I found an old piece of wood from my wood shop and cut it into these strips. Then I'm going to take some double-sided tape and put a piece on there. And then we will make, these will become handles, essentially, that we can use to hold the pieces. And now we're just going to cut them apart. And so I will peel off the paper. And now we can take these parts, put them on individually, give them some space so when we spray or use a brush we can get around them completely. But I think you can see here what we're going to do. So now we can move that around, can spray all sides, and easily, much more easily paint them all. So I will continue to separate these and then put all of the detailed items according to their style, all metal on one, all wooden on a different one, because they'll be painted differently in the long run. And then we will get to the painting. Now that I have all the pieces stuck to the strips with double-sided tape, I'm taking a rattle can spray. In this case, I use tan, giving them a nice even coat without getting too heavy, and make sure you get all sides. And then use a hair dryer to speed up the drying process if you'd like. We also have several white metal castings that come in the kit. Acetylene tanks, tires, wheels, gears, all kinds of interesting details. And they suggest blackening them first. And this is one way to blacken them. There are several different products. I use Jack's Pewter Black, which produces a dark antique finish, it says, on any metal parts. So you should be very careful with this. It's an acid. I'm going to put a little of it in here. And what we're going to do is dip these pieces one at a time in there, and they will take on a blackened effect because of the acid. So let's see how that works. See how quickly it turns dark? And I'm going to use a brush to make sure no air bubbles are lodged on it, because that will make for an unfinished part. So once it gets a little black, put it in water, and that stops the tarnishing of it. Okay, so that's a water rinse, but you can see there now how that has darkened that tire. We'll do that with each one of these. And we'll end up buffing these later, so this isn't going to be the final look. This tarnishing will come off with a little buffing tool, which we'll see here in a bit, and leave what we'll be left with is the look of a true metal item, because this white metal we see underneath can be buffed back to some degree, and it will look more realistic that way. Okay, doesn't take long. If you leave them in too long, they will dissolve completely. So be very careful with this, and with this when you're done. So you can see I have spray painted the detail parts separately, the ones that are metal details and the ones that are wooden, although these are all the resin pieces, but painted them two different colors. The wooden ones have a base coat of a khaki, and the metal ones have a chocolate brown or black base coat. Now, the reason these are black now will become evident in a later step. We don't want all of our metal details to be dark, but what that will do is allow us to paint another color over top and scratch off that overcoat, and we will see this color underneath, which will look more like realistic chipping in the metal objects. We talked about spraying the base coat on the wooden pieces. These are crates, boxes, and you can see I've weathered some of them here. They started out looking like this khaki rattle can spray on them. Then I used the same methods we used on the strip wood earlier for the sides of the shack to weather these, and what that includes is some rubbing alcohol and different colored chalks. So I've got a couple different shades of brown and a little gray, because of course as wood gets older, it grays with age. So a little bit of that might help. I also used some gray craft paint with a dry brush to make some of the gray highlights that you see here. So let's look at some of those techniques again, because then we're going to use another technique that he talks about. But I'm going to dip the end of this brush in rubbing alcohol, get some color on it, and just brush the wooden box. Some of the chalk. Now this will dry a little differently, because right now we're seeing some of the wet from the rubbing alcohol. But try different colors and combinations. Maybe try a little bit of the darker color. So you'll apply the chalks like this in various layers. It will take a few coats. It did when I did these here. All right, you can see the difference, right, already? So this is looking a lot more like a wooden box, aged wooden box. So I'll go back to one of these just to show you the next step. So to make a black ink wash, we take some acrylic ink like this from Liquitex, although there are others you could get, black, and then mix it with some rubbing alcohol, and he gives you the proportions to do that in the instructions. But so we have this made a large quantity, so we can just tap into it when we need it rather than remake it each time. And what we're going to do is get another small brush, dip it completely into the wash, and then we're just going to tap it to the corners or the edges of these boxes. I don't know if you can see the wash flows through the small wood grain marks that they have put on these pieces. And again, this will look darker initially and dry a little lighter. So do it in small increments, see what it looks like, and then you can go back and add some more. Okay, see it crawling down the grain in the wood. It just helps that grain pop out, so you can tell that it's wood and not just a smooth piece of resin. So that's most of the techniques we're going to use for the wooden pieces. And for some of the metal resin pieces, we had some barrels, drums, 50-gallon drums, and some wooden barrels. And what they suggest is drill a hole in the bottom, put a toothpick in it, and then you can easily paint them this way. And we will see in a bit how this becomes useful, as we can take a brush with some paint and just roll the drum and paint it much more easily that way than trying to hold it with your finger. So we'll get to that next, but I will finish weathering these wooden parts, and then we'll move on to the metal resin parts. So I've already painted the red bands on this barrel, but I'll show you what I'm going to do as I paint the middle one. So I'm going to use a white, but not pure white, because these are old dirty barrels, but put a little bit of paint on the brush, and now you can just roll the barrel in your hand on the toothpick, and it's much easier to paint these bands. Then trying to move around, or trying to hold them for sure, but even if they're still stuck to these things, it's hard to paint around the others nearby. But this way you can paint the bands fairly easily. Okay, we'll do another one here, and maybe another color. Let's do another one in green. Don't careful not to get too much paint on your brush, but see how easy that is? And if it's thin, you can do a couple things. You might leave it that way because it's an aged barrel, or you can always just coat it again after this dries. Okay, so that's a easy way to paint round objects, especially like this. I have added more paint to the barrels and scratched some of them up, and I wanted to show you how I did some of that. So I just have one of these tools used for, I forget what they call it, but it is a modeling tool used for applying putty or cutting things, and it has a sharp edge here, so I just make scratches with it and gouges like that on the paint, so it's not perfect. And then I take this wash. This is the MIG Ammo black wash. It's an enamel-based wash, and I'm gonna rub this, paint this on. Looks dark right now, but it will not be like black paint like it looks. Dry, dull, like the top of this one here, or this one here. So got to make a really nice dirty look without being too dirty. Do another one here. You can see how these toothpicks make it real easy to work with. I've already done the top, you can see that, but we'll come back to this when it dries and I'll show you what that looks like. Another thing that I think it's a good way to vary them is use the powder, the rust-colored powder, and brush it on like this. And that will give you the rust look. Okay. Just dry brush and rust powder, and then you've got the rust look. And then I added some more of that black wash right there to make it look like some fuel or oil has leaked out. Also, you can make the oil run down the edges of the barrel. We've added some detail color to the details here. Little brass, metal parts, anything to give it some variety and make each of the little parts inside and details stand out. Added that black wash to some of these as well. And maybe you can see the difference between this one and this one. A little different, just to bring out some of the details. This one has more of a reddish brown, which is good. We don't want them all to look the same. So now you can see how this dried a little lighter, and it just looks like a dirty, oily drum, which is just what we want. I'll show you the rust that I used, and this is Vallejo pigments. They call it dark red ochre. You can see it's a dark rust color. I just get a stiff bristled stenciling brush, put some pigment on it, and then over the container, so I don't lose anything that might come off, just brush this on. And it will make for a rusty looking drum. Some of it will even show up on the black if you do it. Put enough on like that, okay? So now we've got some rust to go along with the grime. And remember to be random about it. There you go. Could put some on top. So a little different look than the rest of them. I'd like to talk about another good idea that the instructions included, and that is how to make a red rag that you might use on a workbench or in a box or find around a work area, right? So take a tissue, Kleenex. I found some red paint, just some craft paint that looks like just about the right color for those red claws that mechanics use, and just painted some of the tissue this red color. So now that it's dried, I can take it off, tear it off, and didn't do a good job tearing there, so we will get rid of the white. Don't want any of that. Shape doesn't matter, but then fold it up into a rag. That looks like it might be too big for our scale. Let's take a little bit off of that. All right, so just fold it up, and you've got a rag that would go on a bench, used rag, and to make it look even more like fabric, took some chalk that I've ground up that's a similar red color and dusted the piece with chalk. See how realistic that looks? We can add it to a scene like this, and we've got some realistic rags that are on the workbench. Just place it wherever you'd like. You can glue that in there if you want to. And that's a real good idea. Adds more dimension and realism. Now we have the white metal parts that we blackened with the with this pewter black. Again, you can use other brands, but this is what I used. And that's all dry, rinsed and dried. And then what we're going to do is buff them out. And there's a couple ways you can do that. There's a nylon attachment to the Dremel tools that works, and it creates its own kind of appearance. Or there's the buffing wheel, sort of a soft felt wheel meant for buffing. And what you can do, I don't know if you can tell the difference, I've already done this one, buffed this one. See, it's a little more metallic. This is a little more rusted looking. And actually some things left like that could be fine. This jack stand, this side is not buffed, and that side is. They both look good. I could easily have kept that and be happy with it. But if you're going to buff them, get the Dremel. I put it on with this nylon brush, fairly low speed, and just buff it up a little bit. Make sure you have a good grip. Be careful how you use this because it could send your part flying. But now you can see maybe a little more metallic. And it looks very much like real steel. So we've got a grill, old car grill. Here's the buffed side, unbuffed side, a little more rusty. You can decide which one you want to reveal. So some pieces like these crowbars and maybe some of the wrenches will look good just the way they are. I think that looks perfect. So I'll leave those. If you want to buff some of the smaller ones, these tools are not a good idea. Way too small. Take maybe a sanding foam, piece of foam, specially made for models. This is 1000 grit, and just do it by hand, and that will bring out some of the patina. What we're going to do next with the tanks, after we've buffed them to our liking, is paint them a solid color, and then, just like we did on these barrels, 50-gallon drums, we can chip the paint and it will reveal this metal color underneath. I want to show you another technique that you can use for many things. You'll see it in some of my other videos about making realistic streets, and that is using watercolor pencils for weathering. And specifically, I like Prismacolor, recommended to me by a very good modeler friend of mine. And because they're more waxy, they leave a better residue behind. And you can get any one of several weathering colors. We got a brown, which works well on this wood, a lighter gray for more weathered wood, or darker gray, black, whatever you want. And what you can do is, the best way to do it is sharpen it to a good point so there's a lot of exposed lead, and then brush it or use the side of the pencil in the opposite direction of the grain of the wood on the thing you're trying to weather. So like this, it's going to add a little brown color. Just hits the highlights. That's what's neat about it. Also, good thing about this device is you can use the point to get in spots like this. And it's very subtle. When you get enough, then you can stop. But if you can see there, the brown that I've added to this and this just as highlights. I did a little on the top edge as well. One more color or dimension to add to the wood. You can do it on the inside if you wanted, which is otherwise hard to get to, and put in this kind of a texture or weathering. You can even use it on metal pieces or smooth pieces, I should say. Doesn't matter whether they're metal or not, to make scratching appearances. And again, using the side of it makes it look a little more natural than trying to use the point. That's another way you can add some weathering to your details.